Recent polls have shown that Democrats are facing an uphill battle ahead of the midterms, but some new numbers are offering maybe something of a different picture. And that is what Harry Enten is back and digging into. Potentially signs of a turnaround, perhaps, Harry. What are you seeing on the generic ballot?
Okay, so, we're talking about warning signs for the Republican Party, and I will just say, uh-oh, for them. That is the phrase of the day, uh-oh. Democrats lead the generic congressional ballot, and you can see their lead is expanding. It's becoming bigger. Look at this in spring. CNBC, it was 2. Now it's 5. How about Ipsos? It was 1 for the Democrats. Now it's 4. How about the Wall Street Journal? It was 1, and now it is 3. So now the average lead here is 4, which is up from just about a point. That's about a 3-point move on average in the Democrats' direction. And of course, Kate Paul, when this is coming amidst the fights over redistricting, I think there are going to be a lot of people wondering, wait a minute, are Republicans wanting to change the lines because they are losing, which they absolutely are on the generic congressional ballot. At this point, Democrats are winning, Republicans are losing, and maybe they're trying to change the lines in order to give themselves a little bit more wiggle room, given what we're seeing, a clear Democratic momentum on the generic congressional ballot.
How does it break down when you look at party ID?
Okay, so this is one metric, right? The generic congressional ballot. How about party identification, right? Because the idea is if you're a Democrat, you're very likely to vote Democrat. If you're a Republican, you're very likely to vote Republican. Take a look here, the party ID margin, Democrats versus Republicans. Look in Q1 of this year. Quinnipiac, Republicans had a lead of a point. Gallup, it was tight. Look at where we are now in the latest measures. Again, Democratic momentum. This is a 5-point move to the Democrats, according to Quinnipiac. Now they're up by 4 on party ID. How about Gallup? What we see is Democrats ahead by 3 points. So again, what you're seeing is clear movement towards the Democratic Party on a very key metric, because if you're identifying as Democratic, you're far more likely to vote for the Democrat. If you're identifying as Republican, you're far more likely to vote Republican. And I will note, Kate, that this is a change from last year, especially among Gallup, when Republicans held a rare lead going into the 2024 election. And that, of course, foreshadowed Donald Trump winning, foreshadowed Republicans taking the House, taking the Senate. And now, of course, Democrats are ahead here. This is a big uh-oh for Republicans as we are at the midpoint of 2025.
But you see some signs as well, even beyond polling that you've been looking at, you think could indicate.
Yeah, okay, so this is the polling, right? You're looking at party ID, you're looking at the generic congressional ballot. How about the special elections? Look at this. In the median 2025 special election so far, Democrats in these different districts, get this, they're doing about 13 points better, the median Democrat, than Kamala Harris did in those same districts last year. That is a huge movement. And last year what we saw was, in fact, when you compare the 2024 special election results back to the Joe Biden baseline of 2020, Republicans were actually doing better than they did in 2020 in those. So again, this is clear movement towards the Democrats, and we're seeing it on 3 different metrics, 2 polling and 1 in actual election results.
Very interesting. Good to see you. Thanks for coming back in, Harry.
My pleasure, Kate.
John?
Oh, can you put up, Harry, the first slide you had there again, the generic ballot test here?
Here we are.
Thank you so much, Vanna.
You're welcome.
Okay. With us now, former Republican strategist Lee Carter and Democratic strategist Maria Cardona. Those numbers, which I hope we can still see here. Brad, show those again, and Vanna White there. Maria, how much of a coincidence is it, you think, that we're seeing that trend in the congressional ballot test there? How much of a coincidence is it we're seeing that and these Republican efforts at redistricting at the same time?
No coincidence at all, John. What the Republicans are doing in terms of the naked, corrupt power grab of trying to redistrict Texas and then going into other states to try to do the same to steal Democratic seats is because they're seeing this polling, is because they're seeing the town halls where voters are pissed off about what Trump and Republicans have been doing, which is going back on their word, betraying the American people, taking away health care from millions of Americans, taking away food from the mouths of hungry children, focused on helping billionaires instead of working class and middle class voters. And the numbers are showing it. And so instead of trying to defend their big, horrendous bill that they just passed, instead of trying to compete with Democrats on the battlefield of ideas and policies that actually do help working class and middle class voters, which is what Democrats are talking about, they have to resort to lying, cheating, and stealing. And frankly, John, I kind of predict that that could actually backfire, because voters are going to see that and they're going to say, so now you're going to try to take away my vote and my voice? I don't think so.
Lee, you've got numbers in your blood. Why do you think that the trend line has moved the way it has on that ballot test, on the congressional ballot test, from where Republicans had a very unusual edge before, and now the Democrats picking up some steam.
I mean, we're still not talking about a massive lead. So I'm not looking at this and saying this is a runaway lead for the Democrats. I also look at the same poll, that one of the polls that just came out on CNBC, and Democrats have a all-time low net favorability. They're minus 32. That's a record low number. What I'm seeing right now is that both sides are wildly unpopular. Donald Trump's approval rating not high, Democrats' approval rating very, very low. And what most Americans are saying is that the political elite are fighting against each other and not fighting for me. The issues I care about the most are cost of living, not gerrymandering maps. And we don't want to see politicians fighting against each other over map lines and have Democrats flee the state looking like they're abandoning the people, not fighting for the people. I think this looks bad for everybody. When people are saying, I'm concerned about my cost of living, fight for that. Don't fight over maps. I think this is a big mistake for both sides. And when I look at this and I look at the poll numbers, I'm actually not encouraged for either side. 78% of Americans say that elites and the political elites are playing by a different set of rules than the rest of us, and they feel like no one's fighting for them, and that's a real big problem for both parties.
Maria, where do you think it ends? Because the news overnight, Florida perhaps getting in the game, Republican leaders there making a move to redistrict, absolutely could pick up Republican seats there. J.D. Vance went to Indiana to try to pick up seats there. What are your concerns that even if states like California try to respond here, the Democrats end up losing in the seat battle in the mid-decade redistricting surge?
Well, certainly this is not something that Democrats wanted. Historically, Democrats have been involved in gerrymandering as well, right? We got to be clear about that. But historically, it has also been Democrats, the ones that have pushed for these independent commissions like the one that is in California, because they're the ones who have wanted the redistricting and the reapportionment to actually be fair and be much more democratic. But what has happened now is that Republicans, with this naked, putrid, corrupt attempted power grab, Democrats are not going to fight with both hands tied behind their backs. So they are going to attempt to also redistrict where they have the power to increase seats for the Democrats. But at the end of the day, John, it all goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning. Republicans are concerned about the shellacking that is coming for them in the midterm elections because, and I'll go back to something that Lee just said, she's right. It's all about what Donald Trump promised and Republicans promised in the 24 election, that they would focus on bringing down the costs of groceries, gas, and rent, bringing down inflation, and they have betrayed the American people.
On the issue of jobs, Lee, sometimes I think you can tell what President Trump is most concerned about by what he does and how he reacts to things. So it's been 1 week since those jobs numbers came back revised with really, really gloomy figures for May and June, revisions down into the low double digits of job gains there. He fired the head of the BLS. And then yesterday in the Oval Office, there was this strange performance where he brought in Stephen Moore with charts and graphs to actually compare his first administration, really, with that of Joe Biden. What does all this concern from President Trump on these numbers, Lee, betray to you?
It portrays to me that he's very frustrated that his story isn't being told and the way that he sees the way things are happening. And he gets fixated on these things. He gets fixated on jobs. He gets fixated on the markets. He gets fixated on a number of things. And he wants to make sure that his story is getting out there. I think there's no one better at trying to control the narrative than Donald Trump. And I think he gets really frustrated when he can't. And that's what we're seeing right now, a huge sense of frustration. I will say, when we look at some of the recent polling, I think it's interesting. We're starting to see a small shift now in how people are viewing the economy. In fact, we're seeing that the most positive numbers and most recent poll by CNBC towards the economy since 2021. And that's a pretty big deal. And I think that's the story that Donald Trump is trying to get out there. Whether or not everybody's going to be buying it, I don't know. I think a lot of people are looking at what happened with the jobs numbers and why is he so frustrated? And I think a lot of people are trying to read into this. But I think we're seeing somebody who's really trying to get a story told.
Yeah, and again, as far as before the midterms in the economy, there is a lot of time there. I think both sides, what they want to make sure of is that on the Republican side, that ideas don't get baked into the cake now that they can't erase before those midterms. Lee Carter, Maria Cardona, great to see you both. Thank you.